Welcome to the South Burlington School Board meeting, and we'll start with comments from the public regarding items not on the agenda.
Just a point of order. Number 11, is that an open discussion with the board and people who are in attendance?
Yes, it is.
Okay, then I have nothing to ask.
Okay. Yes.
I have a comment under item 7, under the Black Lives Matter flag raising. Would you like me to save it for that? Or do it
Yeah, we'll
now?
cover that under the agenda item. Thank you.
It's not on the agenda.
Yes.
I think this is appropriate time. I realize that the board is not responsible for the management of the state teachers' retirement system, but the decisions made on the annual budget in terms of number of new jobs created and salary increases not only affects the annual budget, but it has a long-term effect in terms of the pension fund liability for which taxpayers are responsible. If there is a deficiency in the retirement fund, it's taxpayers that are ultimately responsible under current law. My discussions with the State Treasurer's Office, as of June 30th, 2018, the unfunded liabilities only for teachers' retirement was $1.5 billion. So I think it would be a worthwhile inclusion as a memo item, just so in the discussions of revenue and expenditures, not only the near-term impact is considered, but the long-term impact on the pension retirement fund. It's noteworthy to me, too, that this is the latest figure available as of fiscal year end, that after 10 years of stock market increases, that the $1.5 billion reflects all of that performance. So there's still a net deficiency, unfunded liability as the term is, in the state teachers' retirement system. So my proposal and recommendation would be as a memo item that during the budget discussions, the annual considerations are discussed, but also for taxpayers to be aware of what that might mean in terms of their long-term responsibilities in being accountable for unfunded liabilities in the retirement system.
Any other comments from the public? Items not on the agenda. All right, seeing none, we'll move on. Announcements and student representative reports.
Yeah, so next Monday is Martin Luther King Jr. Day, so there's no school, and there's a couple of things going on ahead of that. On Friday, Student Justice Union will be visiting Chamberlain School for some workshops, and also on Monday, while there is no school, there is a community event going on from 9 a.m. to 11:30 a.m., which a bunch of clubs such as NHS, Key Club will be attending, and is open to the public. And then also this Friday, there's a late start. Second semester officially started yesterday. And tomorrow night, there is an 8th grade informational academic night for 8th graders heading into the high school next year at 7 p.m.
Many music students went down to Hartford High School for All-State Music Festival auditions on Saturday. If you happen to be shopping at Healthy Living, let them know to credit Rick Marcotte Central School, and the school will receive 2% of the sales of that purchase. The Why Not team at FHTMS has a Panera fundraiser on January 24th from 4 to 8 p.m. And Orchard School's production of Beauty and the Beast is next week, January 24th through the 26th.
Thank you, Cole. Any other announcements?
Madam Chair, if you don't mind, Mr. Jabor and captain of the boys basketball team is here. They wanted to make an announcement during the original remarks. They weren't here. I think it's fitting to come at the end of the student remarks. That's all right?
If it's related to an item not on the agenda, yes, we'll take that.
All right. Yeah, go ahead.
All right, hello, I'm Brendan Bridge. I'm the captain of the varsity basketball team. And I just wanted to let you guys know of an upcoming event that our school is putting on. So on January 25th, the boys basketball team is playing Burlington High School in a game that will be dedicated to the awareness of mental health. Sheila Burley Court will be decorated in posters and balloons, and each student that comes in will be given a free t-shirt. We as a team feel that it's necessary to do this at this time of the year because the winter season can be a long and kind of weary one, with cap week for us students and for some of us, for me personally, I have colleges that I'm waiting to hear back from, so it's a pretty stressful time. And so we just want to take the opportunity to have this game to let everyone know that, you know, it's okay to feel not okay, and that we have people around the community and around our school that are willing to help you. So, yeah.
January 25th, was that the date?
Friday, January 25th.
Thank you. And that was appropriate for announcements, so right on the agenda. Any other announcements? All right, I did miss agenda item 4, so I'll ask if there are any amendments to the agenda.
So the only amendment we had is we should recognize that under executive session, we did, in addition to labor negotiations, we did also talk about real estate. So we need to make that amendment, real estate matters.
Okay. All right, with that, we'll move on to agenda item 6, city and school collaboration.
So we have an upcoming meeting, Chair Elizabeth, with Kevin Dorn and Helen Reilly on January 25th at 11:30 in the morning. That's our next session, so I don't have anything else to report. I do have in my report here some things related to the city center design.
Seeing no other comments, we'll move on to the superintendent's report.
So I have 3 items. The first is just updating you about the soundproofing at Chamberlain. This is again related to the close proximity to the airport. So again, I've just, at your place, I put a brief little update for you. Some of it gets a little bit technical, and I'm not wanting to say I'm the expert on all of this, but the noise exposure mapping, which is called the NEM process, has been delayed. However, it will have no impact on the school currently where we are with soundproofing. The FAA approved the acoustical testing based on the current NEM map as well as the current NCP program versus what will be done in the future. So the testing that we've already performed, we did an internal test, we did our own, and then the FAA came and did their own. They obviously contracted that out. What we know is that we qualify for soundproofing. We submit that grant, and then we need obviously approval from the FAA. Currently, as you know, the federal government is not able to, they're not working, so we're not able to get that response. That said, we do know that we qualify. How specific the qualification are, we don't yet know, but the airport management has assured us that we do qualify and we'll be able to move forward with some level of soundproofing at Chamberlain. So again, I don't have all of the specific dates that will come out of that because they're not yet known. But again, I just want to give you an update on that. Okay.
Oh, sorry, comments? Yes.
If you proceed then with the soundproofing at this level and then the new noise map comes out and it asks for something different, you're not using up the FAA's soundproofing money with this round, they would support another round, or?
Yeah, so I think for residential properties, it's a little bit different. You know, if somebody elects to go to for soundproofing, my understanding is that they are done. For our properties, that would not be the case, and we would not move forward with anything that would disallow us to take advantage of further soundproofing in the future. So exactly what that soundproofing will look like, I'm not totally sure. The big push for us, though, on behalf of the district, is to make sure that we're ready for students to have a opportunity not to be disrupted in their school day. Yeah.
Any other questions or comments? All right, thanks, David.
Mm-hmm. So next, I wanted to just highlight for you the update on the Black Lives Matter flag raising by the South Burlington students. Again, I put a little snippet by your place, but I just want to quickly go over those. So on February 1st, South Burlington students, with the full support of the South Burlington School District, including unanimous approval by you, are raising the Black Lives Matter flag as a symbol of inclusion, especially for students of color. The flag will fly for the month of February this year and for years to come. February is also Black History Month. The student-led initiative ties to the larger educational work the school district is doing, including but not limited to all of our ends. So as you know, our ends are academic proficiency, disposition for lifelong learning, personal development, and citizenship. And similar to the larger work of the school district, the students and members of the Black Lives Matter flag committee will be raising the Black Lives Matter flag, will inspire a greater understanding of racial inequity and steps we may take to address that inequity. So information about the event will be shared on our website. And there's a statement of intent from the students and staff and community members on the Black Lives Matter flag raising committee, and that's going to be available as well. So again, this was work that was done last year, as you remember. February is approaching, and I felt it was appropriate to give you a little bit of an update on where we are related to the raising of the flag. So I don't know if you have any particular questions for me on that. I think both. Yeah, definitely district, and we'll make sure that they link appropriately. Mm-hmm.
Any other board comments, questions? Questions to the public? Yes.
Be okay if I read a statement to the board? Thank you. Thank you, members of the board and Superintendent Young. I don't know if you got this. I sent it kind of late today, but I'm writing to applaud your decision to fly the Black Lives Matter flag at South Burlington during the month of February, which is National Black History Month. I'm aware that a letter in opposition to flying the Black Lives Matter flag was shared with you at the last board meeting, and in light of that, I wish to strongly state my support for your decision and to encourage you to not reconsider that decision, which it seems that you're not, and which I appreciate. Seeing that at the last school board meeting motivated me to write to you. I feel that our schools must be a beacon of light in our community. They should reflect strong values, including fairness, openness, inclusiveness, and respect. I'm well aware of the controversy surrounding Black Lives Matter, much of which I believe is founded in misunderstanding and is exacerbated by hyperbole. Things like Black Lives Matter is anti-police. No, Black Lives Matter is against excessive and unwarranted police violence towards African Americans and other people of color. Don't all lives matter, we hear? Well, yes, of course. But there are compelling and urgent reasons for us as a society and a community to focus on Black lives, given the levels of violence, mistreatment, and racist actions carried out against people of color. Some, and indeed some in our own community, argue that flying this flag is a political statement not fitting for an educational institution. I believe it's a statement of equity, of inclusiveness, of racial sensitivity towards our students, as well as our faculty and staff, which we should all embrace. It goes without saying that SB schools are overwhelmingly white or Caucasian in makeup, and as you know from the issues you've grappled with over the past few years, students of color can feel isolated and alienated in that environment, despite the best efforts of our wonderful staff and leadership. Tangible and visible actions go a long way towards sending a message of inclusiveness and solidarity with those who may otherwise be and feel marginalized. Last but not least, our community is not immune from the climate of racial intolerance, fear, and anger that now seems to pervade our entire country. Our little corner of the earth is overall a wonderful place to live despite very real challenges that we face, and I greatly appreciate that we can resolve our differences with civility and respect. You've been great leaders in this regard, and as a community member and as a parent of past SB graduates, I'm tremendously grateful to you. And I wanted to take this moment tonight to express that, in that you've, as I know, heard other voices from our community as well. The time that you took to listen to students that brought this to you last year and to carefully consider this decision is commendable. So I fully support your decision to fly the BLM flag. I'm proud of our South Burlington School District for doing the right thing and for visibly taking a stand on behalf of all students. And I thank you for that.
Any other comments, questions? All right, seeing none.
So,
Move to City Center?
yeah, I want to just move on to the City Center. City Center, I need to be more specific, because City Center, as you know, if you've traveled down Market Street, it's changing pretty quickly. This is specific to the property that is directly east of the newest building, the Allard Square building, which will become 180 Market Street, the city office, the library, and the senior center. And so I just wanted to give you a quick update that I have been meeting regularly and working collaboratively on the design and the access of the parking area, landscaping, and other associated improvements within the easement that the district is conveying to the city on the Rick Marcotte Central School property and on the redesign of the Rick Marcotte School access and parking lots. Discussions are ongoing, and we're still working towards a final design. So I have scheduled meetings with them, and we'll keep you updated as we continue that process.
Great. Thanks. Any questions from the board? Questions or comments from the public? All right, let's move on. Agenda 8, master planning and visioning.
So I don't think Doran Whittier is yet here. So we're a little bit ahead of schedule. So maybe we could move over, Elizabeth, to 9. Dora Whittier was going to give an update personally about master planning and visioning.
All right, we'll shift to 9 and we'll go back if Doran Whittier shows up.
Mm-hmm.
You're cutting it close, David.
I know. I expected them here earlier, but I was looking.
Maybe they've seen our historical agendas.
I know.
All right, we'll move to agenda item 9, public high school choice capacity.
Yeah, so you have this warrant for action. This is part of our obligation under the statute. So what you have here is, again, something similar to what we've done in the past. I provided a brief write-up on our school choice capacity and the recommendation. This recommendation is to be set for a cap of 1 for the 19-20 school year. And again, that no additional siblings be provided the opportunity to attend, as has been stipulated by the board in its February 28, 2015 meeting. So it's currently warned for action. Yes. Yep.
You need a copy, Steve?
We can look on. You got it?
Yep.
Do you have a question, Alex?
Okay, sure. And it says that no additional siblings be provided the opportunity?
When we first
Any
started, there was,
students?
when we first, siblings, obviously, student would
Yep.
be, and then their siblings that would follow.
Oh,
So-
okay.
Yeah.
When this was first discussed years ago, there were situations we were aware of that administration recommended the board at the time, for a period of time, accept a student, and then if there were siblings that we knew were in queue, so that it wasn't really affecting a family situation.
Okay.
There was a period of time that we were accepting siblings, but we also, over time, phased that out so that people,
Yeah.
families could plan accordingly.
Okay, thank you.
And can you clarify again, David, just for the public and actually for me, the issue here is that the funding doesn't follow, correct?
That's correct.
Yeah. So this is a program where I believe the funding did follow, or there are agreements between districts that funding could follow a student when they had school choice. But that changed so that there really really the receiving district would bear the burden of educating that student, the cost of educating the student outside being reimbursed by the sending district. So over time, I think most districts, including ourselves, have kind of minimized the number of students that are covered under this program. Is that fairly?
I'm not exactly, I don't know exactly what other districts have done as far as their actions, but that's consistent with what we have done in the past. And you're absolutely right that prior to this law, we did have agreements with many other districts where students were coming to us, and we had some going there, and we were exchanging, dollars, obviously, for educating their students, or in their case, ours.
Yeah. And this is different than those towns that don't have a high school to send their students. So these would be, this agreement was for towns that had high schools.
Yep.
That wasn't too bad for a layperson's view of that.
No, that's excellent. Right on.
All right, any other comments from the board or the public on school choice capacity? All right, this is warned for action, so do I have a motion to approve the administration's recommendation of adding the school choice cap be set at 1 for the 2019-2020 school year?
So moved.
I'll second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, the motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm in a little bit of a quandary here, Elizabeth, but
They
we've got.
may, they may lose their spot.
I know, I may have to give an overview of the update in master planning, but I don't know, I want to be sensitive to the rest of the times on the agenda, too.
Yeah.
Actually, Les Susie's here. If you guys have a moment, can I do something that's not on the agenda?
No, sorry. We know we have a lot on the budget to cover.
I guess what I would suggest, Elizabeth, is why don't we go with the budget and see how far we can get. We'll come to a logical spot if they do arrive, or when they do arrive, which should be soon, I imagine, and then we can put a pause on the budget and then come back to it. Does that make sense?
Good, yeah, I think that would make sense.
Yeah, okay.
All right. So we'll move on to agenda item 10, the school board line item program budget.
Yeah.
Do we need to shift, Amity?
Yeah.
No, I didn't do anything specific to your line item budget.
Okay.
As the school board budget. I only put together the presentation as the budget in a whole. So you have a copy of your
So
line
this
item
is, this
budget.
is specific to the.
This is just specific to your
school
school
board
board,
line item.
expense.
Okay, gotcha.
Yes.
So that's a particular action that, obviously you need to take action on that.
Okay. And one notation you made is that there has been a change in the way the Vermont School Board Association charges dues to districts and supervisory unions. Can you kind of just talk, Amity, about what that change is?
I believe due to the fact that Act 46 is bringing more districts, consolidating more districts, it leaves less districts for them to assess dues at. So that is the gist of what I understand. And I didn't bring the letter. I should have brought the letter that the School Board Association sent, but I do know that that was a large part of why the increase in the dues assessment is because they don't have as many districts to assess dues to, but they still have the same responsibilities as school boards.
So that's the only significant line
That
item.
was the only
and it's about a
change.
$2,000 increase. And my understanding is those dues are being assessed on enrollment.
Yes, there is an enrollment factor in that as well, yes.
Does the board have any questions on the board's line item budget?
Maybe just, I guess that this is halfway, the memo was as of the 2nd of January, and just looking at our actuals to date, we're a little under 21,000. Are those expenses front-loaded? So in other words, I wouldn't, just multiply that by 2 and say, gee, our run rate's more like 42,000.
No, they're not. So the board award was issued at convocation, so that is fully expensed. The board stipends, those are also fully expensed for the year. So it's not really a 50-50 expense. At this point, the dues were paid for this fiscal year, so those were a little over budget.
but the expenses that we've incurred tend to be
Early in the
front-loaded
year.
early in the year. So
Yeah.
this would be as expected.
Yes, it is
Okay.
exactly as expected, right.
And I just see, you may have addressed this before, but just the secretarial salaries, I see it's 0 except for this year. But our purchase services are way down from budget. Those seem to be the two big variances that jump out.
Yeah, and I'm thinking the secretarial salaries may have been, and I should have checked this before I came, but they may have been due to actually appropriately paying the secretary funds from this line rather than probably the superintendent's line historically.
One question I do have, and I'm sorry I didn't notice this before, is that in 2018, when we were negotiating, we had $2,700 or so actual negotiation services expenses, and we have nothing in there, even though we're negotiating again this year.
So negotiation services are actually as part of the legal lines in the budget. I think this was probably a miscoding of that expense, because there are definitely two separate lines under the legal services. One is for legal, the other for negotiations. So that's where negotiating expenses. Now, this cost here possibly was involving something outside of, it was related to negotiations, but it may have been an arbitration expense or something in that area. I should have looked into details. I did not do that.
Okay.
Any other board questions?
So do I have a motion to approve the South Burlington School Board budget as presented?
So moved.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All right.
Great, thank you.
So I think
Roberto
we can go
is here.
back.
Yeah. So surprisingly, Roberto Fitzgerald said he was a little bit, we're a little ahead of the schedule, so we welcome you to come on forward and sit up front here where you can give us a little bit of an update. You have a thing you want to plug in? Yeah. Yep.
All right, so we're shifting back to agenda item 8, which is master planning and visioning.
Okay. So while Rob gets set up, Rob Fitzgerald is from Dorn Whittier, and we've been working with them on both Phase 1 and 2 of master planning and visioning. Phase 2 is specific to looking at where we continue to go. Phase 1 was around electrical, mechanical, structural analysis, and then this was looking at educational opportunities, enhancements of our facilities. So they've been working with us now for a good chunk of the year, so we welcome you here, and we've had several meetings, and we appreciate you coming tonight. So, Rob.
There's a, down in the lower right-hand corner, down on the, there's a little bar just to the right. One more. There you go.
So you have to Google now. I've lost my phone.
There we go. All right. Great. Thanks for having me tonight. Just going to be a kind of a brief overview of where things stand on our master plan study. So tonight, we're just going to give you a little overview of the schedule, where we've been and where we're headed. We'll identify an outline of the options that are being reviewed as part of the study, the evaluation criteria that's been developed by the working group, and the next steps that we'll be taking. So looking back, we started Phase 1 in 2017. We reviewed the building, both the middle school and the high school building, with a team of architects and engineers, put together a report and capital improvement plan based on our findings of the deficiencies and infrastructure issues at each of the buildings. And then this past summer in September of 2018, we started Phase 2, which is looking at the educational and space use needs associated with both buildings. So in that process, we completed an educational space analysis, enrollment projections. We went through a visioning process. We went and had a number of principals workshops, gained input from the community, went through and did some educational programming. So all of that is that information gathering piece, which leads us to where we are today. We're in the process of developing concepts, which lead into a number of options. Once the options are created, we're going to go through a series of meetings and informational sessions and to receive public input and review on those options, and then we'll have some cost estimates. And so this phase here, we're anticipating over the next couple months we should be wrapping this up. So identifying the options that we are currently reviewing. Option 1 is the baseline capital improvement plan. So in phase 1 of the study, like I mentioned, we put together a number of deficiencies in both buildings that range from mechanical systems, electrical systems, roofing, windows, accessibility concerns, all of those things associated with the infrastructure of both buildings. So in this particular option, we're taking all of that together as a whole to be done at each building, and this option does not take into consideration any of the educational space use issues that we've been reviewing in this phase 2. Option 2 looks at doing a renovation addition at the middle school and a renovation addition at the high school to address the top educational space use issues that we've been finding and discussing with the community and the school district. Option 3 takes it a step further and really addresses all of the educational space use issues and needs at each of the schools. And option 4 is similar to option 3, except we've included the possibility of bringing grade 5 over to the middle school. And then option 5, we're looking at renovations and additions to the Tuttle Middle School to be a middle high school. So this would be one building that would house both 6, 8, and 9 through 12 grades. This would demolish the existing high school and turn that over into fields. Option 6 would be a new high school and renovation addition at the middle school. Demolish the existing high school. Option 7 would be a new middle school and a new high school and demo both buildings. And then option 8 would be a new middle high school. So it's one combined building, but it's all new, and demoing the existing high school and the middle school. So really we wanted to cover the full range, as you can see. Really to, for a number of reasons. One is to show that, we're really kind of exploring the full breadth of options to be reviewed. And, we make sure that all of the questions that people might have raised and say, well, did you look at that? And we can say, yes, we did actually. So that's, and we actually started off with 5 initially. And then after further review with the working group, they added a few more. And so it's really trying to be thorough in this process. So throughout the process of putting together the options and thinking about, well, how do we evaluate each of these options? What should we do? How do we determine which option is best? And so we developed a number of categories with the working group. There's 7 of them, and you can see them on the left there. Education, student-centered wellness, supports faculty, the site, the community, sustainability, logistics and construction impact, so the impact on students and faculty during construction, and then overall cost. And I'm not going to ask you to read that. So I blew them up a little bit here so you can kind of see, and I'm not going to read through all of these, but This is the first category, which is education. Items like, does this option provide flexibility and adaptability for future growth? As you know, some of these older buildings from the 60s aren't as flexible to meet the needs of today's education. So in future designs, we are looking to have spaces that can adapt better to, the changing way that education changes over time. Does it include a variety of space types and sizes? Is it promoting passive supervision of students to give them more autonomy over their learning? Does it seamlessly integrate special education on team? Is there a full integration of technology to support all of the educational needs? So those are the types of things that fall into this category. Under the student-centered and wellness, so one of the things that's come up in both schools is the desire for a cafeteria space that isn't, just a place to go and sit in rows of tables. It's kind of transforming the dining experience to something that's a little bit more enjoyable and has a variety, of spaces where, maybe students want to sit by themselves or sit with a small group, or in a place by a window. This building, for example, there's no windows in the cafeteria. So just thinking about the student and their perspective as they go about their day. One of the other things is, for example, phys ed, transforming that into be more of a wellness hubs. So having spaces that can promote a variety of physical activity for yoga or movement or dance, expanding the interests that are available for students, promoting a sense of community and collaboration for students and teachers. This is a big component at both the middle school and the high school, but particularly at the middle school level, where we have teams, but the classrooms aren't laid out in an organized way that promotes that sort of collaboration and team teaching. So, do these options promote that? So each of those criteria, each of the options will be judged against each one of these items. And then moving on to the site, access to play fields, having a clear and safe, easily understood circulation route on site. As we all know, there's a lot of issues with conflict between pedestrians and vehicles on campus. So, does the proposed concept address, that issue? Students and other people traveling across between the high school and the middle school, and meanwhile, cars going by. So, safe access into and out of the site, and access to the playfields. Under community, we would be looking at, are there quality community spaces? Is the design laid out in a way so that it promotes more community use and public use, easy access for them to do things after hours? And then, is there a public and private separation in the building? When we say public and private, we're talking about, classroom wing, let's say, for example, can that be easily closed off from public spaces like the library and the gymnasium and the cafeteria? Sustainability, which is a very important topic, especially with climate change, being aware of energy efficiency and from the thickness of the insulation that we use in the walls and the roofs, to the performance of the windows, to the lighting systems and integration of natural light into the spaces. All of these things play a role in designing a building for the next 50 years. So, and then the last couple categories is construction impact. So, looking at the phasing and of construction. How does each option rate against that item? So when we're looking at options that have renovation, heavy renovation work without any additions, what do you do with the students in order to renovate that space during the school year? Where do they go? Do we build portable classrooms and move them into there while we renovate that wing? Or are there other opportunities for us to locate students while that work is happening? And how does that work in terms of continuing on through the rest of the building? So we look at that, we look at the phasing and each of the options, and that's a criteria that will be reviewed. What's the impact on students and teachers? And then, is there an option where temporary classrooms are not needed? And then in the cost category, there's an item for the overall cost. Is that how does each option compare in terms of strictly lower and higher numbers? And then there's a cost to benefit analysis, which is if we are going to pay X amount of dollars to do this work and X amount of dollars for this option, which is the best bang for the buck? Do we get a substantially more educational benefit from going with this option versus this one? And then, how do the phasing costs play into the overall number? Because those are costs that you don't get back. And so, it also is another way of looking at the, what's your best bang for the buck idea. So these will be ranked, each option will be given a score. 8 to 10 would be in the best category, 5 to 7 would be good, and 1 to 4 would be poor, and then they'd be tallied up. And then the results of that would be given as a recommendation to the school board. So the next steps, we've completed our visioning report. It's being currently in the final review stages, so we anticipate that being able to be posted within the next week, along with the presentation that we gave. So that'll be made available for the public to view, and we'll be right in the middle of developing the concepts. After that, we'll be reviewing the options, setting up community outreach, ways of sharing the information with the public and getting input and comments, and then cost estimates. So that's kind of where we're at. Does anybody have any questions?
The only thing I would add is that this has been an ongoing, as I said earlier, it's been an ongoing process. We've had a series of meetings now spread over probably close to a year. And so that continues to be an active component. We have a lot of other groups, as Roberto said, we're pulling in that community outreach piece. We've had in the principal workshops, the principals have brought in different staff and students into those dialogues as well. So I think that's an important part of, as you said, trying to get pretty universal perspective around what we're doing.
Mm-hmm. Board questions, comments? Anything from the public? Oops. Alex, did you have something?
I was just going to say, when the presentation's done, can we have the lights turned back up?
Okay.
Oh yeah, I did dim them.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you.
Just one comment, because I think whatever the decision is to do here, I think is so necessary for this campus, and I really think that it needs the support. But there is so much being asked by the city right now of the community, and I know that you have your steering committee meetings. I think the earlier the better I know the city council must know the conversations you're having, but somehow the earlier the better for just the community to understand that the significance of the need here, because we may be asked over and over again for other new things popping up right down the street, and this is so important. So just a request, and I don't know how or when or what to say, but.
Yeah, we actually do have a steering committee scheduled for the 23rd, and I believe this is on the agenda.
We're going to give some updates on kind of the current projects that are happening, city and school. So that's a good opportunity for dialogue. Again, as Elizabeth said, it's the 23rd. We'll be at the city offices, or the city area, city hall, and that's the one. And again, 6:30, public meeting. Yep.
Thank you.
Quite a question.
Good, yes.
Do you envision any of these options requiring bond financing? How is this going to be financed?
I believe many of them would have to require bond financing.
Yeah, unless there's some really significant changes in the education funding model or new construction funding, which we don't see on the horizon. I mean, it would, again, we don't exactly know where the board's going or if they're going, but it would be bonding.
Yeah, I think even the option, which was renovations only, would require bonding, because we've run into that in our annual operating review for the past several years, that our ability to keep up with capital improvements and preventative maintenance work with operating expenses alone year over year has become prohibitive.
Yeah, I also think the financing, the utilization of the bond is important, because it does spread if you're a community member now, but you then move out, or you're a community member now and then somebody new moves in 2 years, that spreads the burden over the course of a 20-year period, so that it doesn't put the burden upon somebody who's here for that chunk of time. Again, we've certainly seen, we've done a lot as a district to try to maintain our buildings, right? On an average, we've had somewhere between $500,000 to $1 million every year in our budget to try to maintain our facilities. So others maybe haven't done it that way and have done it through a bonding approach. So again, I think it's a financing arm that we definitely know has to exist.
David, a reminder too, how old are these buildings?
Yeah, so they're 1960s. This building was built
50 years ago.
Yeah, 50 exact. This is there, and then the high school is 56 years ago. Is that right, Patrick? Yeah.
1960.
Who also built.
Say again.
By an architect who also built prisons.
Oh, I'm not going there.
But I guess just the point,
Some of us
probably
are older than 15 are still
all of the
okay.
financing that was associated with constructing these originally is long since paid off.
That's absolutely
so I
right.
think this is a pretty good asset liability match.
Okay.
So.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. So we'll move on, Elizabeth.
All right, so we're back to Agenda 11 now, so on the school district budget.
Yeah. So making you move again.
Oh, I'm going, okay, all right.
Or unless you want to look.
I'll get it right.
So there are hard copies available. People want to follow along. It's a little bit hard to see on the screen, so we apologize for that. What we're going to do is walk you through board kind of where we are today. I can move
That's
actually.
okay.
And at any point in time, I think board members offer up feedback along the way. We are prepared with an additional worksheet, our budget workshop sheet. So if there's some things you want to see what would be the net effect, we can do that live for you. So we'll do our best to walk you through. We don't have a ton of slides. Some of these, again, are similar to what you had last time. Having fun? Did it last time. Just wait right there when it gets done. this, it's not recognizing.
The connection is kind of because we went through and was just fine.
Hold on, don't touch that one. Let's see if this is. Work your magic, Karsten, work your magic. In the spirit of time, we go hard copies. Let us just walk you through some, so while Amity and Karsten are working that out, let me just start with kind of my portion of this. So, again, to the board, you know, I've outlined on page 2 and 3 some recommended budget objectives and student outcomes that I think are worthy of recognizing. So, and I won't read all of them, but when you look at the budget objectives, this budget does continue to provide the student opportunities that we feel are important and essential to meet our district ends. Again, it continues to evaluate our continuous improvement plan and allows us to continue that work. A co-teaching model, if you've seen around the kind of the change from paraeducators to adding some special educators has occurred, and again, that's in that co-teaching model. It provides some staff to help us with early essential education, as noted here as EEE. Again, that would happen at the central school, Rick Marcotte Central. We currently have programs at Orchard and Chamberlain, and this would add a program at Rick Marcotte, serving our students in the most efficient way to make sure that they are ready for their next steps moving into kindergarten. Obviously, we utilize assessment data. We provide professional development, which is ongoing, given a lot of the initiatives that I think you've heard. We want to be on top of that, and as a district, we've been working hard to make sure that happens. We've also made some pretty significant improvements to ensure safety is at the forefront. We've modified some of our buildings, and again, this budget continues to support that, and it does add an additional safety officer that will have to get figured out. So that will bring us up to 4. Obviously, we have 5 buildings, so we'll have to figure out how we move them around to the 5 buildings. Quick student outcomes, you know, again, we're ranked among the best in Vermont, and obviously recognized in various reports like the U.S. News World Report. High school has been rated, as you know, in the past by Niche as one of the highest. And again, we offer, as you know, many programs. Our program of study is extremely inclusive of a lot of opportunities. 80% of our students participate and will continue on after graduation in some sort of an opportunity in education. 70 students, juniors and seniors, participate in dual enrollment courses. And again, moving on, standardized test scores, enrollment, AP courses, and then enrollment in some of our higher level programs. So those are just a quick little overview of you know, some of what this budget does, and educating our students, so helpful. That helps us with technology. Cole, awesome. So that's the quick overview. I want to go to page 4, and maybe we can catch up to 4. This has been a slide that actually was not in your slide deck last time, but again, I think from my perspective is really helpful around just kind of understanding the, you know, what goes into the determination of the property tax rate. So on the upper left, we have the expenditure budget. We have the revenue, and we put the percentages associated with what's going on with those. So our expenditures are up, our revenues are down. Right side is the yield, slightly is up. Equalized pupils, bottom left. This is the number of students not articulated with seated students, but factored students. We're up about 0.94. Bottom right, common level of appraisal is down slightly, 1.23. All together, our tax rate is up 3.36 in this particular proposed budget that you're seeing tonight.
How does the equalized pupil number compare to what some people refer to warm bodies?
So it's different number, Jerry. It's, so we get additional factors for high school student, a little bit more.
I understand.
So it's higher than our seated number of students.
10, 20?
We're about 2,400, is that right? We're about 2,400 and a little 30 probably as a district. 2440, yeah.
2447.
But does the 2447 include tuition students? It does.
Yeah. Yeah, so you can, there's factors associated, but these are equalized. These are what we count as our students. Yeah.
I understand the adjustments.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to compare the apples and oranges.
Yeah. So this next sheet is what we provided. This is a continuation of what we provided last meeting.
Right.
So this pulled over. There's been no, I don't believe, any additional changes. Is that right?
Yes, no, that's not right. The equalized pupil count did go up yet again since our last week's meeting. We got another factor. This is still not a frozen number, so there's even a possibility it could change again. We feel if any change is going to happen, it will be on the incline, not the decline.
Yeah, I had an email that came in around 4 o'clock this afternoon from Brad James, and I was worried that, it was yet another change. And it was a change for some of our colleagues. Burlington was one of them that had a change in their equalized. So that's just a little bit of a kind of what's going on. So again, ours has remained steady since the last correction. So 25, 36, 46. So it's up obviously a little bit in 23.67. So that's our equalized. Other things on here, again, you see the 415, which we talked about earlier, the 3.36 on the tax rate, and what we do have to report on the ballot is the net education spending, which is the 6.45%. That's actually what has to appear, which is often confusing to a lot of our community, because you have an overall expenditure budget, you have a tax rate, and then you have this net spending per equalized pupil that you have to put in on there. So over here in this right corner is about income sensitivity and what someone with household income of 40, 60, and 80. Obviously, we're not giving all of what those, what the middle factors or higher factors would be, but it shows that it's graduated. These are the 2019 factors, percentages, and what the difference is. And then here again, those of you who aren't familiar, on $100,000 of assessed value, average condo, average home. So that's where we currently are.
Now, are the equalized pupils spread out over the entire K-12 system, or are they heavily oriented towards the early years? And the only reason I'm asking is because if they were in the early years, they would carry through for 12 more years, so you could project that those numbers would continue in the budget. Or are they are the equalized pupils spread out over an entire 12-year program?
So the equalized pupil, I'm not sure, the equalized pupils are individuals, so our preschool students count for 0.46 of a 1.
Oh, okay.
All right, and we have students that count for obviously 1, and then students that are ELL get a little bit more than 1. So all those factored together, and they...
High schoolers get a little bit more than 1 in
Yep.
this calculation because it's presumed that a high schooler is more expensive to educate than an elementary school student because of all the technology.
So 1.26, I think, is high school. So there's graduated differences along the way. All added together comes to that number, and it's a 2-year rolling, 2-year average.
Right.
So that's why you may have a significant gain in 1 year, but it gets leveled out over a 2-year period.
Okay.
Yep. So this is, again, similar to what we did last time, board. Again, just highlighting what the request was. So that pre-K program on the top left, we added 3 FTEs. The rationale for that obviously was the ability for us to serve the students, the cost, $196,000, and what percent of that was equal to the overall 4.16. So we've broken that down. So triple E, and some of the reduction as a result of some change in revenue, obviously, that we could see that reducing. And then making some changes on the co-teaching model. 9 para-educators we would be reducing, and we would add 5 special education teachers. Again, the change in the net there. 0.5 guidance at the high school. 1 FTE for security. Again, I said that earlier. That would bring us to 4. Up here, adding some additional staff over in the finance office to help with some of the current ongoing requirements that are happening from the agency, which are big. This chart of accounts, I'll just pause for a second to tell you, it's a huge, we don't have a handbook yet, and so we're having to make decisions on where we place things for the future, and we don't have a handbook. Now, those of you who are familiar with the financing, handbook 2 has been around for a long time, but AOE hasn't yet come up with it, so we're kind of leading the blind, and we're gonna push on that to say we got to get that figured out. So that's that. We've got some additions for some continued help. This is not mentoring for teachers, but mentoring for our students and coordinating some of that. Some program contingency. Again, this came out of our budget advisory. We had that up higher initially, but again, as a result of kind of where we are, we brought that down to where it is currently. Some stewardship programs, maintenance and facility stewardship projects for some of the things that are required in our master planning, envisioning work that came out of that, lease purchase, and then those are all the overall additions. So that's 1.44 of that. Pause, any questions?
The cost of the new universal pre-K teachers, in your question and answer sheet, you have salary listed as $89.79. I'm just wondering, for those individuals, is that salary including salary and benefits, or is that pure salary on your question sheet?
Salary and benefits, I believe.
Okay. And benefits are about, what, 20% of compensation?
On average.
Okay.
It depends, Jerry, obviously, you know.
Just trying to get a ballpark of what the new salary is for the new people.
Amity? So, again, this has a few updates, but pretty consistent on the recap. 4.15 on the budget increase overall. Kind of shows you a little bit about where we are. So 2% of that 4.15 is related to benefit increases and salary contingencies. Obviously, the board's currently negotiating 3 collective bargaining agreements. So 2.5% of the 4.15 is that. 1% of that is related to these what we call continuing service expenses, so agreements that we have in place or things that are happening. So tuition agreements, our bond principal amount obviously is in that, contracts with other vendors, lease payments, etc. And so that's that. So that's 1.44. And then below is about the revenue. You've heard, I think, pretty specifically from Gary and Amity around the revenue reduction that we've seen, $746,000. And again, Gary and Amity have put just some figures on that in general. So the healthcare recapture resulted in $468,000 loss in revenue for us over a 2-year period. And so that again, this doesn't all add up necessarily to be exact because there's some other components in there, but just wanting to let you know of that revenue loss, 3.21 is associated with that. Correction in prior year, we had some things that were counted both in expense and revenue, so those were corrections on our part for counting of revenue. That's $190,000, so or 1.58. And then a reduction in special education revenue as a result of the state reimbursement threshold process is 1.97. Again, if you add that up, it's not going to come up exact to that. So again, there's some other pieces in there. Amity, I don't know if you wanted to give a little more on that.
In the revenue pieces, really, generally speaking, the remaining differences to get to your 6.19 reduction really is minimal pieces throughout all of our other revenue items. So we did hand out a detailed revenue sheet at the last meeting and maybe the prior one as well, but it does, you know, there isn't one specific area that I could say, oh, this is part, you know, it's a multitude of different adjustments, you know, as we've been able to tell by history or by estimates that we've already seen. So those are where the rest of those reductions come in.
No. So last time we didn't break down that revenue quite like that. We felt like it was helpful to be able to see. We did it on the total budget on the increase and what was happening, but obviously we have revenue at play too, which is specific to the tax rate, right? Obviously, so is the overall expenditure, but that revenue has to be subtracted, and then we have to raise those funds through taxation.
questions?
So again, this is the same thing as last time. This just shows you kind of where we've been at and how that all adds up at 4.15 and some of the big buckets of the budget and what's happening there.
I did have one question on that chart.
Yeah, go ahead, Jerry.
Amity, can you explain that miscellaneous contingency and transfers, which has a 198.7% increase?
Mm-hmm. Well, as you can see, in 2019, there was a very small amount of 207,000 in comparison. So, you know, from 200 to 600, it does look like an exorbitant amount.
I just don't know what it is.
So, sure. Contingency is where we have to put in, for any collective bargaining agreements, we have to put in money as a placeholder, so it goes into our contingency.
Okay.
And then we added the $100,000 for the program contingency that was suggested by our citizen budget group, just so that we have a little excess in case, because we've been spending down the fund balance significantly.
So it's a little bit of a slush fund?
I wouldn't call it a slush fund, because you know how that, I mean.
I understand, but that's.
But it does help us in the future budget. So if it's unspent, it's moved into the following budget years. So we've just spent down our fund balance very significantly. Sorry, we're playing the Dodge game. We've spent down that fund balance pretty significantly over the last couple of years, so.
It's just a big increase. So
Yes, it does look like a very harsh number, but in total of the budget, it's not as harsh as that number.
The other thing is that in previous years, we've had a contingency teacher or two in the budget.
That's correct.
In a separate line item or in a different place in the budget, and we don't have that this year, which leaves us in kind of a bind if we end up with, you know, a kindergarten class that's bigger than we expected, or, you know, a specific grade at a specific school that needs a teacher. Typically, we've had at least one, if not two, contingency teachers, and we don't have that in this budget. So that would go in there.
It's the kind of line item which, for me, I would like a footnote which says this is what this means.
Yeah, good point.
Okay.
You know.
Thank you, Jerry. So again, this is work that Gary put together. I think, again, if you go down through your budget worksheet, you know, this is a simple way to just demonstrate what kind of the math is happening. So if you work from your expenditures down, this is kind of what's happening. It's nicely laid out in simple terms. Total expense, obviously, minus your revenue, gives you your education spending, divided by the number of your equalized pupils, and brings you to the your ed spending per equalized pupil. So a nice way to do that. And then obviously you have your property yields, and then your equalized tax rate, prorated, common level appraisal, gives you your actual homestead tax rate.
David, can you go back to the previous slide?
Sure.
So this is one of the important points I want to make. The number you come up with at the bottom, the ed spending per equalized pupil, that's the amount of money South Burlington community and the state of Vermont puts up to educate one student. But that's not the amount of money which you're using to educate a student. And what I mean by that is I simply took the expenditures and divided it by the number of equalized pupils. And if you do that, the amount of money you're spending per pupil, forgetting about it's just South Burlington State, it's everything, then it comes out to about $20,000. Now the reason that's important to me is I want to compare how South Burlington succeeds in educating students to the rest of the nation.
Yeah.
And to do that, I have to know what the real cost of education is. So this is an important number. I would not argue with that.
Yeah.
But I think another important number is the total cost of educating one student, where all funds are collated and then divided by the total number of students.
Yeah. I definitely have been challenged in that with a similar question. I do think, Jerry, that you would have to make sure that you are disaggregating your total expenditure appropriately across the nation to account for things like construction.
I agree, but if you read Rebecca Holcombe's article in Digger, there were so many numbers in that article which left tremendous confusion.
Yeah.
Because she was picking certain numbers to utilize to make her point, not necessarily all relevant numbers to the issue.
Yeah. I think if you could extrapolate out of the total expenditure, those components that you would say would directly, and again, you're going to get into difficulties around saying educational facilities aren't part of that. But I just know, because we've been talking about master planning and visioning, for instance, Massachusetts Building Authority will cover 80% of their construction of a new or renovating their schools. We're one of the few, actually, I think in Vermont, that have been working hard at our stewardship work. And we've averaged between 500,000 to over $1.5 million every year to try to maintain our 5 facilities. Whereas my colleagues to the north, south, east, or west are not doing that. So if we were to calculate that same expenditure line, you would have great disparity between us including and them not.
So a coin has two sides. Let me give you the other side. And the federal government is giving communities like South Burlington money for certain types of aspects of education. Is that correct? Certain mandates from the federal government.
Well, they're giving us mandates, yes, and we do get reimbursement.
I thought I saw in the explanation that some of the external funds include federal dollars.
Yes,
that's true.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So if that money is going into the educational program out South Burlington, it's part of the cost of education, but it's not included in the number you have at the bottom here. So I understand what you're saying.
Well, it would come through, though, it would come through as a revenue.
It's a revenue.
So the revenue
offset.
then has to get subtracted out of that expenditure. So in fact, that's why you see that the revenue gets, so again, that $700,000 less next year is subtracted from our expenditure. So those grants are part, we have to subtract that out.
If you receive it from the federal government in revenue, you can't ask the state to give it to you as well. So that's why it extracts
But
from.
it's money that you're using for education.
True,
Yep,
yes.
that's why when you subtract the revenue, that net spending per equalized pupil is working to get out a more accurate number. However, I want to challenge you to say, like, and I'm just picking on school construction, or the ability to maintain your facilities or not, is kind of a apples and orange comparison. It's not the same for everybody. You don't do anything with your building, you don't have to subtract that. You don't have that difference.
Okay.
And I'd be happy to talk with you more about it.
Okay.
You know, it's,
I'll let it sift through my neural net.
yeah, no problem.
I think the main thing is if you're looking at someone else's number, if you're looking at another state and they're saying, you know, we're spending $11,000 per student, for example, you have to make sure that you understand where that 11,000 falls in this calculation. Is that excluding?
I agree with you 100%.
Is that excluding the federal portion? Is that excluding state grants? You know, what is that $11,000 number, and are you comparing apples to apples, or is it apples to oranges? So yes. The other thing that, and part of the reason, we're not trying to hide that $20,000 number. The main thing is the state mandates what has to go on our ballot and how our property taxes are calculated. And sometimes it can really confuse people if there are lots of numbers. As you were saying with Rebecca Holcomb's article, it can get very confusing if there are multiple different numbers for the same thing. And so we do tend to focus on this one because it's the one that we vote on as a community, and it's the one that we calculate our tax rate on. So yeah, I understand exactly the point you're trying to make. You just have to be careful about making sure you do all that same digging in other states to make sure that all of their expenses are really in that expense line item.
You can see like that healthcare clawback revenue change, how that particular amount of revenue loss
So
has
you're
affected the tax rate.
you're comfortable saying that your belief in terms of the cost to educate one student in the South Burlington school system is the 15,000 number that you have there?
Well, I think that's the best thing we have in comparison to others.
It's the best thing you have.
It's the best thing we have right now that's in
All right.
comparison. I would like to challenge, I still have challenges around that particular amount, right? In things like what, you know, the clawback numbers and things that we are really not in control of as much as the big part of the budget.
Okay.
Thank you, Jared. So this is just again, we gave this to you last year board, or last time about their tax rate history. Again, we certainly are, you know, administratively, we've been working diligently to make sure that we're bringing a budget in that's conscious of the overall expenditure, and obviously on the tax rate. We've worked hard, I think, over the years to try to be responsive to that. This simply just gives you a little recap of the 5-year history, and so while I'm not wanting to say this is not a concern, but I think when you look at it over time in the 5-year history, you can see that it's obviously similar to where we were in below where we were in 2015 and also 17. This is the 10-year, and the 5-year. Again, not just to pull at the 5-year only, but this shows you the 5 and 10. So 5-year average is 3.13, and the 10 was 2.20. Again, that was on the spending, and then the change in the tax rate you see on the right bottom.
Just on this exhibit, it seems as though the tax rate hovered at around a certain level in the beginning of this decade, and now it's at a different one, and it jumped up 10 cents in 2014 and then in 2015, and we're still around that same level. But do you know what happened in those 2 years that would cause it to jump that much? 7.5% and 6%?
I don't off the top of my head.
Yeah, the budget.
Like I would never forget it at the point.
Yeah, the budget. Well, the budget amounts are pretty steady.
Yes.
Yeah.
It had. Did it have to do with the way they fund through? It used to be the dollar yield came into play just 2 years ago, right? Yeah, I
think
honestly
it had
am
a
not
combination of CLA, my guess.
Yeah.
And the property yield wasn't called the property yield.
It wasn't,
then.
right? Then it was
So
something
there
different.
was some pretty significant at the same time. I think our Equalized maybe was not the same, but we can look at that.
Yeah, we
can
can get
give a little more detail on some of the, what were some of those big events, Alex.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. So this next slide is just getting into some, well, and yours is actually some staffing stuff, I think, but let me just stay on the presentation. So this is kind of, as you know, I think Monday, the city just adopted their budget. So this is actually in the front cover of what our typical budget book is, and so it gives top left city, middle is the school, and then the combined rate. And so currently what we know out of the city, again, I was not at the city meeting, but what we understand, they're at 5.86. We're currently estimated at 3.35, combined at 3.97. And then again, I want to be sensitive to, we haven't really checked this with the city, but again, wanted to give you some clarity on what that would mean on 100,000 from the city, 538 on 100,000, $1,003 for a total of 2141. And then you can see that compared to 1819. So again, we just, again, Amity and Gary just put that together today to give you a little bit of a benchmark on where we are.
And just as a piece of information that the city did tell me, if you all don't already know, but I think you probably do, that they did get the approval of the 1 cent tax increase on their side for the paths.
Oh, pennies for paths.
Pennies for paths. So there was, that is part of this 53.82 tax rate from them. So
Okay.
just as a side, it's up a cent for that pennies for path.
And we'll get more as we, again, this will be a big
Right.
part of our steering committee meeting as well. Thanks, Amity. And I'm sorry, I wasn't looking at the slides in order, but the next one is actually about our staffing. So this, currently our enrollment, again, we're steady with our enrollment. Going to see a little bit of an increase. I think that's really important. We have community members that want to stay here, and our students want to stay here and be educated here. And so that's pretty stable, and our core staffing is also stable. Again, when I say core staff, that's again our classroom teachers at the elementary. We have many other staff that are attached to them, but we're keeping the core teacher as at the same. Again, I'm a little concerned presently. I mean, I think administratively we're comfortable with this budget, but I think when we have a lot of factors in play with older buildings and a lesser contingent. We have, factors around student-related enrollment if there's significant uptick. So there's some level, I have some, a little bit of anxiety about, I'm hopeful that there's not a lot of things that happen, but important, different than in the past. We have made some reductions in different places, not this year. And as Bridget said earlier, we do not have a contingent teacher in this current budget. We have carried as many as 2 contingent teachers in the past year. Some of those are actually rolled into this particular staffing over the last 2 years, just to be clear. Because again, a lot of people have asked what's happening in some of the core classes around the schools. This is a little, we often get asked about the teacher to the staff ratio, and again, I think this is a highly, from my perspective, can be highly debated around what's in and what's not in, particularly within Vermont and also in comparing us to outside. But again, this was, again, just to give you a little bit of some visual representation around where we are in comparison to Vermont, Burlington, and Colchester. Again, similar, we heard that from you folks last year, get a little bit of a last meeting to get a little benchmark on where we are. And so, obviously, we have a March 5th date, and I don't know, again, what the board's pleasure is. As I said earlier, we have the budget workshop sheet is available if you want to make some recommendations and changes, or if not, we also have at your place the warning that does need to be approved, which represents the budget workshop amount that you see in there for the figure that we need, which is the net spending per equalized pupil. So, I don't know, anything else, Amity, you good?
Yeah, if I can answer any questions or if there's any other concerns.
A generic question. With regard to students with special needs, especially since you're focusing on pre-K, who does those assessments? You know, I think I heard the number, about 70 of the pre-K are considered special needs. Reading one of the articles. Who does that? What are the special needs?
Yeah, so assessments and and rendering the program, kind of one and the same. I'm thinking, I don't know.
Who identifies who has special needs in pre-K? Is that your question?
Well, they're new coming into the system, so who makes the assessment?
Yes.
That they're going to
Some
be.
students come already assessed through Child Integrated Services from birth. So some students are identified at birth, or one or two.
So that would be done. That could be done by healthcare.
Coming to our district at 3. Some students are evaluated by our early childhood special educators and speech pathologists using developmental assessments through following the Vermont law.
Okay, so the next question is, since you're hiring new people for these education programs, do you have assessment pieces which you've established to monitor whether the investment in new individuals for these activities is bearing some productive outcomes?
For all students, all of our pre-K students are evaluated with
gold. There you go.
Thank you. And then they move on to their assessments in kindergarten and literacy and math assessments. And our kids with disabilities are also assessed with those same assessments.
So it's a curriculum, and same thing when they come into our system. So they are evaluated on how they're doing. Those students that come with special needs obviously have been pre-identified. And part of the addition of this program, Jerry, was that we have students that we need to serve out in various parts of the community. So how we get out and service them is also part of the difficult equation at times. We have partners that also help us with that, but there are students, and that's been a really tough challenge for us to meet those legal obligations and those services that are needed. We happen to believe that that's a really good thing, right? It's helpful to be proactive, to help students at the earliest possible time. That will help, hopefully, help them thrive and not have to continue to have services along the way. Although some we know are going to have that based on their disability.
Other board questions? Alex?
Yeah, I have a comment on the student-teacher ratio exhibit. Do you think you could go back to it, please, so the people on TV could see it? It looks pretty stable over the years, so perhaps it might be worthwhile to reduce the number of years shown, but add a few extra districts, because right now we got statewide, which is useful, us, which is useful, and Burlington and Colchester are two comparables. But if we could add, maybe Essex, Chittenden South, Chittenden East, and maybe Milton or Winooski, they might have different situations. But I think perhaps including only 1 year, whatever the latest year from the AOE, would be useful. And I think people like to look at student-teacher ratios when they're thinking about the budget.
I'm not opposed to doing that. We typically get caught so Burlington, not caught. it gets more and more difficult to do kind of an apples-to-apples comparison.
Yep.
Around when you start getting into the multiple, the districts that are seeing, like Chittenden South, right? There's a lot of variation there that can exist. So it doesn't necessarily, with districts similar to us. That's why we've chosen Colchester and Burlington. But I'm not opposed to giving you more, and in fact, that data is readily available.
Yeah.
Alex, yeah.
Okay.
So no problem.
Yeah, as long as it's a fair comparison,
Yep.
you know.
Other board questions or concerns? Other questions from the public? Okay, we have this warned for action. This kind of begins the work of persuading the community to accept the budget. I know I appreciate the effort the administration, the business office, as always, puts into this, and 13 years later, this does not get any easier. I do have concerns about the shift, and it's, and if you look at page, or the 5-year tax rate history, David, a lot of the hard work of your team and you really has led to the last 4 years really seeing a decrease in tax rate. And there always seems to be a bit of a correction that occurs. I do look at, there was a significant amount of effort made to really work on some reduced expenses that would have benefited the district that were ultimately affected by the healthcare clawback. And that represents, I don't know how that number would change here, but that was almost $500,000 over 2 years. Actually, I thought it was a little bit higher than that, but that was obviously outside the district's control. And I do think my own feeling is that the administrative team and everyone in the business office has done a good job preparing this budget. This is a tough nut to see that kind of swing in 1 year. I'm certainly not in a position to critique where we would go to change that. I think there's been a pretty good discussion of that. I think we had a discussion at the last meeting of where the recommendations in reductions in force would come from if we needed to go to, I know.
The level funds.
Well, the level funded, but anywhere in between as well. And I think in the past, those typically are not wholesale program reductions. No. They might be reduced.
Sizes of programs as opposed to eliminating programs.
Exactly.
Entirely.
Yeah.
Well, I think you're. I don't know. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. I'm really just making some of my own observations. I got to only participate electronically the last time.
I don't think those observations are correct. I mean, we have been working hard to be really responsive, and again, this year for us is important around our continuation of the discussion with master planning and visioning and the work that we need to do. So we were really trying to make sure that would stay kind of on par with where we were in last year and have at least an equal or slightly reduced. But I have to say that the loss of revenue, the mandated safety security situations that are part of our society, and then our important vision to making sure we onboard and help kids at the earliest possible time are part of the big pieces that are in front of us. And again, I struggled with this earlier in the budget process around, we had 3 additional safety officers in there, and we're going to make that work. But I want moms and dads and guardians to be able to send their children to school and feel happy and comfortable, and I want kids to be able to be in the environment and feel really comfortable about learning and not worried. And I know that in our past recent, that was something again at the high school that was really compromised. And so on behalf of the students and the community, that was certainly an important component. But again, that's a component. that adds to the tax rate, as well as some of the mandates that are coming out of AOE, and I'm not wanting to say those aren't good, but we've got a lot of stuff going on right now. I talked about chart of accounts, and we're adding some staff to help with some of those onboarded mandates. I think they're going to be good in the end with Power School as a financial resource, but we're spending some resources to get that done, and that's also part of that. So I want to be careful and not to target too much of the AOE, but we've kind of said, and we want to be clear with the legislature, that time out. We don't want any more mandated things coming out that are going to affect our ability to do the work that we know is critical, for our students. And having that capacity is something we're struggling with.
One question I had raised, I don't know if anyone's thought about it more, in the last week, one question I raised last week, Elizabeth, was whether there's enough contingency in the budget without the contingency teacher. And granted, we've rolled in the contingency teachers from the last couple of years, and they've kind of stayed in the budget. So maybe we're comfortable with that. But, we had talked about that last time about potentially adding a little bit more contingency in there. I don't know what other people think about that, but I just wanted to raise it one last time before we moved to accept the budget.
We can certainly open up, as I said, we can open up the workshop sheet and see what happens if you add. You can bracket some things if you so choose. But again, that's really, you've called the question, so I want to let that be your process.
Does the rest of the board want to weigh in? Steve? On contingency?
A little ahead of schedule. Why don't we see?
All right, let's try it. Get the worksheet.
We said $100,000 last time.
So that changes our overall percent in the budget to 4.35 from 4.15. It raises the tax rate 4.36%.
3.61, right?
Instead of the 3.36 increase?
No,
No.
it was, yes.
I got it.
That's you're looking at the property yield there. It's 3.61. Yeah, it was 3.36, then it goes to 3.61.
Yes, sorry, that was my fault, not yours. 3.6.
Yeah, my own feeling, Bridget, on this is that it's not a material impact, but I also feel like we do have that track record of having worked through the contingencies for so many years. Everyone on this board and probably in the community has heard my concerns about FTE ads, and that those are really investments over the long term in terms of both salary and benefits.
Mm-hmm.
And I continue to have concerns about that. I feel like the swing in the last 2 years on FTEs, I think, was over 10, I believe, if I'm recalling correctly. And I really feel like this particular year, the message should be, we've done our due diligence there, and it may come to, we would have to really look at some programming adjustments if we had a kindergarten class that was over the limit. And then we haven't really ever had to, thankfully, revisit class size too much, but I know I'm reading a lot about class sizes around the country and feeling that we do a pretty good job here. That's my general feeling on adding more.
Okay.
Anybody else want to weigh in?
I have to say I felt a little more comfortable. I just wanted to raise it again because I raised it last time. I did a little more digging through the line items in between that meeting and this meeting and feel like there is more than I thought there was in a different line item. So, I can definitely get comfortable with that. I just wanted to make sure that we were all comfortable with that before we took action on the budget.
And I didn't ask the administrators to be, nor all of them are here, but Mark, Holly, and Patrick, Joanne, and Carson are here. So, I mean, they've been integrally connected to the building of the budget. And so again, I think, you know, they can speak for themselves. I mean, we had to make some decisions in the budget, and so each one of them had some things that they needed to give up along the way and give some more to get us to where we are. So there's been work done, but I feel like we're confident about where we are. I think we're still, you know, when we have that 3.61, you know, there's some level of concern based on education spending and community confidence, you know. So I don't know if there's any particular observations that they would like to offer you, or if you want that. I don't.
Yeah, I'd welcome any feedback from our administrators.
Didn't mean to put you on the spot.
We agree with you, Elizabeth. We worked really hard on this budget.
And I also don't want to put our students on the spot, but I'm enjoying the advertisements I've seen around investments in education and our students being the dividends that the community realizes from that. But I would welcome Arnell or Cole if you have any comments. You've had a chance to sit through some pretty rigorous budget discussions.
I'm going to be honest. Something I didn't want to mention it before because I don't know if it's a stupid question, but I have no idea what FTE stands for or like what 0.12 or 0.63
Yeah, so
means.
full-time, like full-time equivalent. So
Yeah.
somebody who's 1.0 would be a full-time teacher.
Right. But then like what's a 0.12? Is that like
Yeah, a
12%
fraction.
of the
Yeah.
time they're
Yes.
here?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, that's what I thought.
So it's literally a part-time person, or it's adding on someone who might already be here, 3 days a week, adding on a little
Sorry you
bit of
didn't ask that
extra
earlier,
time
Arnell.
for them. Yeah, that's a fair question.
Yeah, I think it's a great question. We throw acronyms around like
Yeah.
crazy out here. You know?
There's one thing I would say, I think it is important, is that, the only thing in terms of FTE that's additional in the high school budget is that 0.5. The district has made investments in campus safety, and, we've heard from our students and from mental health professionals that, just making the schools more secure is not really the only thing that we need to be doing. And so and I think it reflects our priority. There were other FTE that we could have added around mathematics class sizes, for example, are getting pretty big in other places, but the only FTE that remained in the high school budget was for the halftime additional guidance, and that's really to recognize some of the mental health challenges that our students are facing and how that kind of ripples out throughout the school. And also, since we are investing in other kind of safety measures, we want to really look to the places where we can be proactive, and in a high school setting, that's often the guidance department. So we're really still looking at guidance caseloads that are in the high 200 or the 220s, which is, you can imagine that's a lot of young people to have on your caseload. And, every single student goes through guidance. These two awesome guys, they go through guidance to help them with whatever it is they're doing, and then kids and families in crisis go through guidance to help them. And so I always talk about how it's like the heartbeat of the school because every single student goes through there. So, I just want, maybe for the record, or for people who want to know why is there any additional FD at the high school, that's the reason.
Thank you, Patrick.
I had a quick question, if that's okay. I noticed that there was only a 1 FTE security position, and because I know had seen and heard talk about adding 1 for each elementary school. Is that is 1 FTE like that one person, only one person, or?
So we currently have 3, Cole, and 1 kind of supervises and provides, breaks. 1 at the high school, so we have 2 kind of at the high school, 1 being that supervisor, and then 1 at the middle school. That supervisor kind of goes back and forth. That's the 3, and we're adding 1 additional one with the idea that we're going to try to encompass working in the elementary schools. So we'll figure out how best to do that. It's still going to have some expectation that the elementary schools are going to have some, system in play, because they aren't going to have somebody you know, a safety officer all the time, every day. So we went from 3 to 1 in this proposed budget. 3 was going to give a 1 at every building.
All right. Other questions, comments?
Oh, Mark, yeah.
Oh, Mark.
I just want to say that I think a challenge in this budget is that there are no real bells and whistles. Right? There's no big, world languages in the elementary or new arts programs. It's really improving upon all the systems that we've got in place. And I think, I'll speak for elementary, that we're really just trying to not lose any ground in the stride, the steps we've taken to move forward. And moving forward with that MTSS piece about the special educators, it will be a big deal for us, but it feels to us like this is a next step in our progression to creating systems for each grade level, for all of our systems to meet our kids' needs.
Thanks, Mark.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So do we need, are you looking for action
Yes.
on the budget first? And do we have a separate agenda on the ballot item?
Yeah, we have
do.
we do. We have the ballot item.
All right. So do I have a motion to approve the school district budget for FY 2020 as presented?
So moved.
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
And the motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you all to the building administrators and the business office.
Mhm.
Oh, there you are, Emily. And pass that on to Gary as well, please. So we'll move on to agenda item 12, which is to consider the annual school district meeting warning.
Mhm. That is by your place, Elizabeth.
Since the equalized pupils numbers changed from when that was published, I did not have this until we got here tonight.
Okay, I did not.
I will need to change those numbers.
Did that change, Amity?
Yes, it did.
From the previous
So-
one?
Yes.
Oh, so that number is different.
Yeah, because the net endings ed spending per equalized pupil does come down just slightly because the increase in the
equalized.
equalized pupil.
So we
But it will be less than what we.
Yeah.
Yes.
So with that, if with the board's approval, we will make that adjustment and approve the FY 2020 budget with that adjustment.
So we'll need to sign that, but we're going to need to make that change.
I'll make the change on the first page.
Yep.
The signatures happen to be on the second page.
Yeah, so we probably should read that amount, though, to be clear.
That would be great.
Yeah, so, Amity, that.
I don't think I have a copy of what the wording on the.
Oh, no, you want this number. They're just looking for these numbers.
The two numbers, the cost per equalized
Yep.
pupil will have to change, and the percentage increase in the spending per equalized pupil.
Okay.
So I believe that, correct me if I'm wrong, it should be, instead of 15,978.72, which is what's in the warning, the draft warning, that number should be changed to $15,944.38.
Correct.
And then the projected spending per equalized pupil, the change, and it should change from 6.68% to 6.45%.
Correct, yes.
In the meeting warning.
Yes.
Yep. So I think you can note that, and then we can sign, we'll make those changes on those pages. Yeah.
So would we typically read this through or really just?
Yeah, I think you should, you typically have read it in the past.
Okay. All right, so I will take a pass at the warning with these revisions and then take a motion to approve. The legal voters of the City of South Burlington School District are hereby notified and warned to meet at their respective polling places at the Frederick H. Tuttle Middle School on Dorset Street, the Orchard School on Baldwin Avenue, and the Chamberlain School on White Street on Tuesday, March 5th, 2019 at 7 o'clock in the morning, at which time the polls will open, until 7 o'clock in the evening, at which time the polls will close, to vote by Australian ballot on the following articles. Article 1 is election of officers. to elect 2 directors to the South Burlington School District Board of School Directors, 1 director for a 3-year term and 1 director for a 2-year term as required by law. And Article 2 on the budget, shall the voters of the City of South Burlington School District approve the school board to expend $51,746,533, which is the amount the school board has determined to be necessary for the ensuing fiscal year. It is estimated that this proposed budget, if approved, will result in education spending of $15,944.38 per equalized pupil, and this projected spending per equalized pupil is 6.45% more than spending for the current year. I'll stop there.
Yeah, perfect.
Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved. I'll second that.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Great.
So I've got the line of the second page for signatures. Thanks. All right, we'll move on to the agenda item 13, the 2020 budget communication plan.
Yeah, so we have that in there as well. Just outlining some of the dates that we have typically done in the past. And again, those are targeted in the kind of in a calendar format that Delina has put together for us. So again, these are kind of our typical ones that we have. If there are other ones that you see you want to add, again, this is not an all-inclusive. We may want other ones in there as well. So obviously we have school board meetings identified, budget presentations I've am committed to doing at the schools. Again, I've gone around currently to meet with them on the raising of the BLM flag, Black Lives Matter flag, and also an overview of budget, but I'm going back again in February. So February 11th, you see the 12th, the 13th, 14th, etc. I haven't populated with anything else at this present time, so it's really open for conversations. In addition, we also have, Elizabeth and I will go to Channel 17, and I know Delina has given me, I think, a proposed date, maybe. I'm not yet. Yeah. Yeah, so we'll have that, which for 1 or 2 board members will have an opportunity also on the candidate forum side of it as well. So I don't know, we're just beginning this. If there's other ideas, I maybe would suggest getting them back to myself and Delina for things that you think might be really good. PTO meetings, typically, I tried to go to, and they've been really receptive. I haven't scheduled those in. Also, students, maybe some opportunities. Cole and Arnell, maybe you want to think about that and give us some ideas as well.
Yeah, I was going to ask about, I know a lot of seniors are 18 years old and eligible, so I was wondering if there's a way we could, or just in general, how we could talk to the seniors and try to get them to, or at least inform them or something. I'd be open to talking about
so
that.
maybe you can kind of discuss this with Mr. Burke and ideas around how you might want to put something out through announcements. If you wanted to do a couple scheduled times where interested folks that are interested in learning more about the budget, those that are voting or just want to learn more about the budget, then you can have a scheduled after school meeting or something like that, and we would make sure that we're there and you could be there as well. It might be a nice opportunity for some co-presenting.
Yeah, I can talk with Mr. Burke about that.
All right.
Great. Anything jumping out right offhand to anybody, or should we just continue to populate this?
Are the items in bold full board like things, or because I know I believe I heard Mr. Young talking about how there's a few things that you would just go and do.
Right. So it's a good question, Cole. So the steering committee is all bolded. That's because that is the whole board there. Same thing with our the school board meeting on the 6th. But then we also have these others, and those are not all board members. These are typically just events that I will do, and sometimes I've had a board member come along for a piece or a part of the presentation. But that's not an all-inclusive event. Those that are not fully bolded.
So would you like us to come to the steering committee meeting?
I'll leave that up to Elizabeth.
Yeah, I think it's up to you. Maybe what we should do is just make sure we forward the agenda over so you know at what part, there will be other items discussed, but we love the community that's there and the city council to see some of our students in action. The flip side is it's yet another meeting, so why don't we run the agenda past you, and if you can attend, that would be great, or attend part of it, that would be wonderful.
Because I was remembering from last year, a lot of what Alex and I talked about was kind of reinforcing student programs and what makes SB so good. So I don't know if Cole and I at that meeting, that's something we can talk about, or even the Channel 17 thing we did. So that's kind of what I was thinking for him and I.
That's right. Great. I forgot. That's right. They came. That's right. Well, you'll be the big star this time. That's good. So on those, if you have other things like the student piece, then make sure you send us back an email, Delina and myself, and we'll figure out how to add them in.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, we'll move to agenda item 14, other paper articles, and I noticed I'm up on student outcomes. I'm going to need some help, David. I did want to ask, does the rest of the board have any feedback as to what you think would be meaningful in this topic for the community?
I am so sorry. Before we move off of budget communication, budget book, are we going to get a chance to?
You did ask that last time.
Are we going to get a chance to look at it, or do you want feedback on that, or you feel like you have enough direction on it to go forward?
You've given good direction, the board has, and I just haven't worked a lot with the administrators. Some have been ahead of the game, some haven't, because I haven't sent them yet the kind of the parameters of what I'm looking for based on the recommended changes. And honestly, we haven't had a ton of time, just with all of the stuff, so we'll focus on that now. And I think in the first couple of February meetings, we can come back with some updates on where we are with a budget book. Again,
no, we can't.
No.
Because it gets approved. This is my concern, is that it's normally approved by about the 25th
when do we do the budget?
or so.
When do we do the book?
Now?
This is due the end of January.
Yeah, so we have to get it done. So
and the book, I thought, was due by like the 25th or something.
Yeah,
it's
right
very
around
fast.
the 25th. It is very quick, and the problem is a lot of the data that I have to do doesn't happen until tonight, or the approval. So now I can do my work, but I know there's the narratives
we'll get right on
it.
We get some time this week.
I believe, if I can, Krista has notified the administrators of the deadline, so I think she's been getting some of that, the narrative pieces together, so I can check with her too to see where we're at.
Because the narratives are important, and the main, just to reiterate, my main feedback was that whole frequently asked questions section. I was hoping it was dropped, and that more of that was incorporated, because it was good information, but it just needed to be incorporated in some kind of thoughtful, organized, discussion, as opposed to just sort of leaving it to frequently asked questions. So that was my main feedback.
That's pretty standard, and we have a lot of the standard sheets that we know need to go in there.
Yeah.
The narratives, again, from Mike Martin and Gary, myself, administrators, they're all on notice. I haven't pushed yet. And again, some, as I said, like Holly has already done hers. So I need to get on top of that. So sorry about being vague.
I think typically the board has then an opportunity to review a draft. So what would the
maybe for 24
hours? I think we're going to have to do it.
It usually is that quick of a turnaround anyway. By the time it gets forward, gets to us, and then it's formatted by Krista and then put together. It's often, I think, now I'm sorry, I don't know history so much on this part, but is it given at the is it brought to the steering committee meeting? No, okay. So I wasn't certain.
But we're close by the
because the meeting is the 23rd, and I think the 25th.
Yeah.
I know it all happens just in a whirlwind.
So maybe what we can do is try to have, I don't know, I'm over-promising probably, but maybe have some sort of a draft available for the 23rd or before. I'm not going to be much before, but for that week, 23rd, 24th, for review, because I think we have an obligation to get it ready. So we have to coordinate it with the city too. Yeah. Well, maybe we'll come back with an email on the timeline.
Okay.
All right, but
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to.
I was just trying to buy some time.
I know. I'd love it if it were mid-February.
It would be really nice.
Unfortunately, no.
I'm certain Krista would much appreciate that.
How'd we get to the January middle already, huh?
So now to other paper articles.
Sorry.
Thanks, Bridget.
So what we have on the docket for the 24th, or submission that'll run in the 2/7 issue is student outcomes. I think our thinking was to link this, to the, prior to voting on the budget.
Our students.
The flip side is, I guess I'd be open to suggestions. Is there any element of the budget we would want to utilize a board article on for that same time frame? And if not, I would appreciate a little bit of guidance on what elements of student outcomes you'd like me to focus on. And I'll certainly work with David on that as well. Any initial reactions?
I think it would be good to just connect with Mike Martin. We've talked a little bit about this, but I think he could be helpful around some of the current initiatives that are going on and some of the things that we're seeing with students. So I can link him to you specific to the other paper article that's coming up. And
Yeah, and I think I'd like to link with Arnell and Cole too, and sort of think about this through the eyes of students who have gone through the system as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. We can talk about a communication, but I'll need to get that circulated. Usually we get a little bit of the weekend, so probably by the 24th.
I was hoping you would say something like May or something, following my earlier.
Yeah, sorry. Okay, do we want to think about adding any topics? Past master planning and visioning?
I'm not going to taunt you, because I don't want to assign somebody a topic.
Did you have a topic in mind?
But,
All right. So why don't...
Well, I would say that,
Legislative.
one thing I would say is that this double-sided insert, I'm just not sure it's going to be ready for the March timeframe, just given the fact that we've added extra options and things are just taking slightly longer than we had expected. So it might be okay to have that be an article, just sort of an update article, that one that's due on the 28th of March could kind of give people an update on where we are, if we don't have anything else.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
All right, so why don't we shift that? We'll put that as a placeholder in the 328 category. And when this comes on the agenda, let's just make an effort to fill out the last two areas.
Okay. And should we put Martin's name by it?
Yes.
One thing I was thinking is the crossover date will happen, I think, in March. So there might be a legislative update that could also happen in a similar time frame. So maybe we'll just put legislative update if it's not in our topics for consideration, and see if that makes sense. I think there is some anticipation of a variety of bills that might affect education that may make it over and crossover. All right. Move on to agenda item 15, negotiations update. Bridget, do you want to give that?
Sure. So on the support staff, we met with support staff for the second time this past week. I guess it was Monday. Is that right? Yes. I've got my days confused. Feels like it's been 2 weeks in one. So yes, it was just a couple days ago. We met with support staff for the second time. And then we have another meeting scheduled with them on February 11th, and then another meeting scheduled after that on March 11th with them, and then some planning meetings scheduled in between. And then our next meeting with the teachers is scheduled for the 24th, so next week, next Thursday, or I'm sorry, yeah, that's next Thursday. Yep, I've got my days, again, confused. And then we have a couple more dates planned out after that in February. So 2 more dates after that, I think, before the breaks, I believe the 4th and the 18th, if I'm correct, before break. So that's kind of where we are.
All right. Moving on to agenda item 16, setting the agenda for the February 6th meeting.
So I am not going to be at this meeting, so I will have Joanne sitting in for me on this one. Again, I think I probably would not do the superintendent's report unless there's a need for something there. I think the master planning and visioning is important, and the budget communication are probably the, important to, and I'll have that organized.
All right. Anything else for February 6th? All right. Future agenda items on agenda 17. Anything we can take off? Or anything we needed to add? I think one thing that came up a little bit this evening was kind of coordinating the city and school longer-term investment strategies. And at some point, whether it's in the steering committee context or maybe we use part of a school board meeting to really talk about kind of what we know is on the docket for the city and then what we're anticipating. We're talking about master planning and visioning all the time, but maybe to start to, I think as Monica mentioned, frame for the community kind of what the next 5 years might look like in terms of those initiatives.
I think it's a great idea, and it may be something that we push even at the steering committee. And we have not been in the past. We've had more steering committee meetings. This might be a perfect arm for conversation. To be listening and learning and understanding. To some of the points that were shared around some of the things that are going on. So maybe that could be a focus of the 23rd, is to talk about maybe a more scheduled frequency of this of the meetings on particular topics of future growth, future needs, etc.
Okay. All right. And 18, consider the minutes of, we've got 3 meetings to consider, January 2nd, the 4th, and the 7th. Any changes? And 2 meetings on the 7th. Any changes, comments on those? Seeing none, those are approved. And we have a consent agenda. We have 2 items, retirement and a bid.
Yeah, so I just want to, just do a quick pause on, if I can, Elizabeth, on Janet Hayden.
Okay.
She's been a 1.0 FTE teacher at Orchard, as a English language teacher, and I just want to recognize that she has been with our district for 36 years, and it has provided, just awesome service, to the students of this district, and she's kind of sad to go. I mean, she's very connected and loves the kids, but knows it's the right time. So I just wanted to, on behalf, recognize her for her service and all the good work that she's done for our kids.
Great. Well, on behalf of the board, I'll make sure we acknowledge her service and thank her for her contributions. All right. Any questions or comments on the 2 consent agenda items? Right. Seeing none, we don't require action, correct? Seeing none, those are approved. And AP orders 24 and 25, any questions? All right. We have an AP order check on agenda item 21 to the Howard Center for Human Services in the amount of $81,633.57. We also have a AP order from the Burlington School District in the amount of $115,431.61, and an AP order for Essex Westford in the amount of $76,422.78. And action is required on all of these. Can we just get a quick recap on what these are for?
So the Howard Center check is for tuition that we pay for students that are being outplaced for special needs. The Burlington School District, part of this payment is the tech center tuition that we get billed on an annual basis. I think they only bill us once a year. And then there's also tuition to the Horizon program, where we outplace students to the Horizon plan.
Okay, I was curious about the Horizon School. Can someone tell me a little bit more about it, please?
I believe Horizons is a school for students at risk, is my understanding, so.
Right. It's an outplace option for us.
Right. Yeah. It's similar to what the Howard, you know what I mean? It's a Howard Center type thing.
To the Howard Center?
You send out students to that, to the Horizons program also.
And Essex Westford is?
Is also the Essex Technical Center's tuition, and that's just first half of the 2 payments that are made to them.
Okay.
So can I move to approve all 3 of them, or do I need to move to approve them separately?
You can do them all together.
Okay. I move that we approve the accounts payable checks to Howard Center for Human Services, the Burlington School District, and the Essex Westford School District.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
And the motion passes. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
I think you have a first and a second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned. Need a couple signatures here.